For nearly 80 years, one currency has reigned supreme, not through choice, but through design: the US dollar. It is the lifeblood of the global economy, the unit of account in trade, finance, and energy. Every country, every bank, every business has needed dollars to function. The world's oil, its black gold, has been priced and sold almost exclusively in US dollars since the 1970s. But tonight, we are entering uncharted waters. Quietly but steadily, cracks have appeared in this empire. And for the first time in modern history, a real challenger has emerged: the Chinese yuan. This is the story of how the petrodollar system was born, how it has dominated global finance, and how it may be unraveling before our very eyes. And most importantly, what it means for you, your savings, and the future of global power. The birth of the petrodollar, a devil's bargain. To understand today's crisis, we must rewind to the 1970s. In 1971, President Richard Nixon shocked the world by abandoning the gold standard. The dollar, once pegged to gold, became just another paper currency, fiat money backed by nothing but trust. But trust was fragile. Without gold, how could the dollar maintain its supremacy? The answer was oil. In 1974, the U.S. struck a historic deal with Saudi Arabia. The Saudis agreed to sell oil only in U.S. dollars. In return, the U.S. promised military protection and arms. Soon, OPEC nations followed. Thus, the petrodollar system was born. Every country that needed oil, whether Germany, Japan, or India, first had to buy dollars. This created a perpetual demand for U.S. currency, cementing its role as the world's reserve currency. America had found the ultimate trick. It could print dollars, and the rest of the world would need them. The dollar's golden age power without limits. For decades, the petrodollar gave Washington unparalleled power. The U.S. could finance massive deficits by issuing debt because the world eagerly bought U.S. treasuries. The dollar's dominance gave America a tool of economic warfare: sanctions. If a nation was cut off from the dollar, it was cut off from global trade. Above all, the U.S. enjoyed what economists call the exorbitant privilege, the ability to print money at will, while others had to earn it. The petrodollar system didn't just support the U.S. economy. It became the foundation of America's global empire. But every empire faces decline, and decline always begins with cracks. The cracks appeared: debt, sanctions, and distrust. The first cracks appeared in 2008. The global financial crisis exposed the fragility of the U.S. financial system. Banks collapsed, trust evaporated, and the Federal Reserve printed trillions of dollars to prop up the economy. Foreign nations watched with unease. If the dollar could be printed endlessly, what gave it value? Then came 2020. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the U.S. printed more money in a single year than in the previous century combined. Inflation surged. But perhaps the most damaging blow came not from economics, but from politics. The United States began weaponizing the dollar. Sanctions on Iran, Venezuela, and Russia showed the world that access to the dollar was not guaranteed. In 2022, after Russia invaded Ukraine, the U.S. froze nearly $300 billion of Russian central bank reserves, essentially confiscating them overnight. For other nations, this was a wake-up call. If it could happen to Russia, it could happen to anyone. The message was clear: the dollar was no longer neutral. It was a weapon. Enter China, the Petroyuan rises. As trust in the dollar eroded, China saw its opportunity. Beijing launched the Belt and Road Initiative, offering loans and infrastructure projects across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. But increasingly, those loans were denominated in yuan, not dollars. In 2018, China established the Shanghai Petroleum and Natural Gas Exchange, allowing oil contracts to be priced in yuan. And to calm fears, these contracts were linked to gold. In other words, China offered oil sellers a choice: take yuan, then convert to gold if you wish. Then came the breakthroughs. In 2023, Saudi Arabia agreed to consider selling oil in yuan. Brazil and China signed a deal to settle trade in their own currencies, bypassing the dollar. Russia, cut off from dollars, began using yuan for energy sales. Step by step, the Petroyuan was born. For the first time in half a century, the dollar's monopoly on oil trade was under threat. BRICS and the multipolar world. But China is not alone. It has allies. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, represent more than 40% of the world's population and nearly a third of global GDP. Together, they are building alternatives: payment systems outside SWIFT, local currency trade agreements, central bank gold accumulation at record levels, In 2024, BRICS expanded to include Saudi Arabia, Iran, the UAE, and others, nations at the heart of global energy trade. This is more than economic cooperation. It is the embryo of a new financial order. The US dollar is no longer the undisputed king. It is just one of many players. Why the dollar still holds power. But let's be clear. The dollar is not dead. Not yet. It still accounts for nearly 60% of global reserves. The euro, yen, and yuan lag far behind. The US Treasury market remains the deepest and most liquid in the world. Investors still flock to dollars in times of crisis. And the network effect built over decades is hard to break. Trade, contracts, and debts are deeply intertwined with the dollar. The dollar's decline will not be sudden. It will be gradual. But history teaches us that gradual declines often end with sudden shocks. The tipping point. When the petrodollar breaks. What would it take for the petrodollar system to collapse? The answer may lie in Riyadh. If Saudi Arabia, the world's largest oil exporter, fully embraces the yuan, the dam could break. Other OPEC nations would follow. Dollar demand would plummet. In such a scenario, the world could shift to a multipolar currency system. The dollar, still dominant but weaker. The yuan rising in energy trade. The euro, regional but relevant. Gold returning as the ultimate safe haven. This would not be a smooth transition. It would be chaotic. Impact on everyday people. For the average person, this story may feel distant, but its impact will be very real. If the dollar loses its reserve status, America can no longer print money freely. Imports become more expensive, inflation worsens. U.S. living standards fall as the empire of cheap credit collapses. For those outside the U.S., the shift could mean new opportunities. Emerging economies may gain more power, but uncertainty and volatility will dominate global markets. The decline of the petrodollar is not just a financial event. It is a geopolitical earthquake. Conclusion: the end of an era. We are witnessing history. The world is quietly moving away from the US dollar. Not overnight, not with headlines, but step by step, deal by deal, trade by trade. For the first time since World War II, the US dollar is facing a true challenger. And when reserve currencies fall, they rarely rise again. The petrodollar gave America an empire without borders. The Petroyuan may be the weapon that finally ends it. And the question we must all ask ourselves is this: when the dollar loses its crown, what happens to your wealth? This is Felix. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more in-depth financial and political exposés.